Welcome to Full Press, a media criticism podcast where listeners and viewers can escape the media echo chambers, the mainstream media echo chambers, for a precious 35 minutes every 2 weeks. I'm Harrison Lowman, managing editor of The Hub. What are we going to chat about today? We've got quite the lineup. Israel, Hamas, Gaza. There's winning the war, and then there's winning the media war. We'll get into that. An update on the Travis Dhanraj grand exit from the CBC. More details there. And social media is on fire over coverage of Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, I think now, wildfire wood bans. As always, I'm joined by my two lovely co-hosts, Tara Henley here in Toronto and Peter Menzies over in Calgary. How are you doing today, you two?
Just great, thanks.
Very well, thanks.
Peter has just returned from the homeland in Scotland, so I assume you're feeling invigorated. Peter, are you wearing a kilt? We can't see below your waist.
No, but I spent 4 days wearing a kilt, so it's just getting cleaned up now. So stomping about the heather and yes, recalling past glories and visiting places where my great grandfather lived.
Good. Okay, so I mentioned this is a very touchy subject, so we'll do our best to sort of step through it here. A listener had asked us to talk about, owning the narrative as it relates to the war in Gaza. So let's get into it because, as I mentioned, there's a war on the ground happening, and it might increase as Netanyahu moves IDF forces into Gaza. But then there's the war playing out on social media and on media airwaves, both here in North America and in the Middle East. The media is obsessed with this region. I just want to quote Maddie Friedman, who's an Israeli-Canadian, who said, "When I was a correspondent at the Associated Press, the agency had more than 40 staffers covering Israel and the Palestinian territories. That's significantly more than news staff that they had in China, Russia, India, or in all of the 50 countries of sub-Saharan Africa combined. This is a place, it's a small dot on the map, but it's a place that the West is obsessed with when it comes to media." I just want to start overall, and I'll start with Peter and then move to Tara. Who do you think, Peter, is winning the media war here in August 2025?
Oh, Hamas is definitely winning the media war. It's been able to get its message through, the images it wants to get through, the idea that of genocide is taking place in Gaza, which is quite remarkable. And Israel has found itself increasingly friendless in terms of media coverage, and it's quite amazing to watch how successful an authoritarian government ruled by terrorists can be in gaining credibility with
From the
media
free press.
as opposed to those representing a modern liberal democracy.
Tara, what do you think? What's the headline for you?
I think my overwhelming instinct on this story is just extreme caution for a number of different reasons. One, I mean, just speaking for myself, I don't cover armed conflicts. I don't cover geopolitics. I don't cover the Middle East. I don't have a background in the Middle East. And in addition, like most journalists in this country, I don't have any contacts on the ground there. And actually, really, most organizations in this country right now don't have boots on the ground in this war, as it's so dangerous and difficult to get people in. And so I think at this stage, like most of us journalists have to exercise a lot of humility on this story. The fog of war is a real phenomenon. And in addition to that, in any war, you are also going to have the information war, which is a war of propaganda from both sides. I don't think it's possible to really decisively discern what the facts are at this stage. And I think that it's a very, very difficult story to cover. And on top of that, the stakes are obviously very high, a lot of human suffering going on. And it's an explosive conflict. And so the stakes of getting the facts wrong, can lead to unrest, can lead to violence in other countries outside of this region as well. So it's a super, super tricky story. And I think we all have to just know that we don't know a lot right now.
Well, you talked about access. Let me give people sort of a peek behind the curtain here. So if you want access from Israel, you have to be embedded. They're tightly controlled. Netanyahu has said, probably noting the fact that they're losing this media war, that they want to bring in more foreign journalists because they feel unfairly treated. At the same time, Hamas, if you want to operate in Gaza, you are going to basically have to toe the Hamas line. Western journalists who are not allowed into Gaza are relying on stringers and journalists on the inside. I think Al Jazeera is the only one that's not relying on these local stringers, that has more freedom of movement there. And then domestically in Israel, following the horrific events of October 7th, where all these civilians were slaughtered, the government wrapped its hands around domestic media, pushing those out who they feel, are pushing out messages that could hurt Israelis. I'm interested, Peter, what you think. You mentioned imagery. Obviously, the images that Hamas has at its disposal are very powerful. Rudyard Griffiths, co-founder of the Hub, a few days ago talked about the humanitarian disaster going on there. Hamas is able to deploy pictures of this. They're very visceral, shows a lot of suffering. You have military historian Max Boot talking about how Israel's losing the information war because it's the battle of victimhood. And I'm wondering what you make of that, and the idea of, the expression in journalism too, a picture's worth 1,000 words, how imagery plays into this media war over there.
Well, a good example is the image of the child reported to be suffering from malnutrition that the New York Times ended up correcting, discovering that child was in fact suffering from another medical condition
as well, yeah,
prior to the picture being taken. The challenge, and I found it an interesting challenge, in that while the initial image was shown on the New York Times Twitter post that has 50 million followers, the correction was on their corrections account, which has 40,000 followers. So, well played, Hamas. Found the most sickly looking child they could and got it in front of the cameras, and the world saw that. That doesn't mean that there aren't real images, but it does, I think, illustrate the challenge for journalists in trying to verify what is true, particularly when you have a lot of the journalists involved have connections to Hamas or are under Hamas's threat, to their existence. I mean, these are not pleasant people. This is not like you're battling Justin Trudeau and the Emergencies Act. These are, genocidal terrorists in charge of a country, and one would expect a higher level of skepticism regarding the information they are providing than is being displayed, I think. And in terms of the human suffering, of course, we all no one likes to see that, but at the same time, we have to remember who's causing it. And the fact of the matter is that Hamas could lay down its arms, return the hostages, and it ends tomorrow night.
One thing I'm struck by in Israel's inability to sort of tell its story, own the narrative, is you talk about pictures. I haven't seen any pictures of tunnel fighting, photos of Hamas. Basically, the narrative in the West is that this entire war is being conducted, 5,000 feet above Gaza, where bombs are being dropped, when in actuality there are also forces, IDF forces, putting their lives at risk, going into tunnels, taking part in fighting there. So something's missing there. I think I was doing some research yesterday. Israel does not have an English language spokesperson. It closed down its Ministry of Information. No head of public diplomacy at the Public Diplomacy Directorate. Israeli journalist Haviv Retiger says no one in the Israeli state apparatus tracks the claims about the country or the war and responds, handles damage control, or manages the narrative and coordinates the message. Tara, can you respond to that? Just in that, the government needs to tell its story, be accessible to journalists. If it's going to challenge certain claims, provide evidence that is then passed along to journalists, like, what do you make of the fact that they, don't have these megaphones that are then being heard from journalists?
Well, I mean, again, back to what typically happens in war. Of course, there's going to be confusion and disarray and disorganization, but claims of the Israeli government should be held with maximum skepticism as well. As we learned from the Biden episode, governments lie, and any government is going to lie, and particularly in a time of war when things are so high stakes. And so I do think that maximum skepticism has to be applied all around. And again, back to my original point, that some of the facts are just not going to be able to be confirmed and ascertained when there's so much confusion on the ground. And that I think it just is a time of humility, of knowing that we don't know certain things, and it's going to take a while to know things for sure.
Peter, how do we do this, though? Because I know I see you've commented on this about online and in your writing. That, it seems like Western media goes in sympathetic to the sort of Hamas side, understandably at the same time, wanting to show the plight, the human suffering of Gazans who are caught in between the terrorist group you just described and an army, from Israel that's trying to win a war. Like, what do you make of that?
Well, I think for a long time, there's been this alliance between left-wing politicians, the left in general, and the Palestinian movement. I'm confused as to what its source is, but it's been out there for at least 30 years, maybe 35, 40 in terms of that, and it's grown stronger. And the left has a lot of influence inside newsrooms and within the journalism world, the community. So I think that has tilted the scale. I think the information war, the propaganda battle, has been won by Hamas. I think you see more and more Canadian commentators starting to lean towards against Israel, saying, okay, Israel's gone too far, but nobody seems to really have a solution. Like I said, the bottom line on how this can be ended seems to have been lost in terms of that. So it's a huge challenge, but you're also seeing, I'm surprised that there isn't more resistance within the journalism community to and sympathy for a liberal democracy over an authoritarian terrorist regime. I find that actually kind of chilling. I mean, of course you're supposed to be skeptical from, the word you get from most sides, but I'm very surprised not to see a default in favor of the liberal democracy, and as opposed to the default to take the word of the terrorist organization. I just find that quite incredible, to tell you the truth.
Peter,
I don't think there should be a default on either side. I don't think there should be any default. I think if journalism is about truth seeking and fact finding, that there is no default. It's wait and see with the facts.
Yeah, no, I think that if you're listening to two sources, I'm not saying default and favor that side, but I'm surprised not to see people sort of saying, "Hey, wait a second, you're a terrorist organization. How can I trust you?" Versus, "Hey, wait a second, you're a liberal democracy. How can I trust you?" Typically, you would see, I think right now you're getting into a longer debate about, two-sidism and that sort of stuff. So yes, you want to find the truth in the middle of it, but to find people leaning in favor of the terrorist authoritarians is, I guess, what troubles me.
One of the things
I think you can hold both things in your mind at the same time. I think you can hold maximal skepticism for Hamas, but also skepticism for Israel, and an understanding of the dynamics of war and how tricky that can be.
I think one of the things that happened, I guess it was around the 70s, and historians talk about this, is that the narrative flipped. A lot of mainstream media like an underdog, and what happened was Israel was seen as a David in the David and Goliath story, and now it's seen as a Goliath. Before it was seen as, this plucky, upstart democracy surrounded by enemies, fighting multiple wars and defending itself, and now a lot in the West see it as this military Goliath that is, killing civilians, prioritizing the lives of its people over everyone else. Like, I think there's a narrative issue here. I wanted to get your guys' take, though, on this. One of the issues, too, the Israeli government would say this, is they would allege that Hamas fighters, Hamas sympathizers are donning press vests and pretending to be journalists. The Committee to Protect Journalists has said at least 192 journalists have been killed. That's on both sides, overwhelmingly on the Gazan side. But Israel would tell you that some of those people have been posing as journalists. We saw famous Al Jazeera correspondent Anas al-Sharif killed in an airstrike recently. Hugely celebrated, worked for Al Jazeera, as I said, who has a lot of access in Gaza. At the same time, Israel coming out allegedly with all this proof that he orchestrated attacks against Israel. CNN and BBC come out and say that they've established that before the war in Gaza, al-Sharif worked for a Hamas media team in the Strip. I don't know what that means. They didn't expand upon it. Peter, how did you sort through all this and this idea that, there are actual journalists that are doing their job on the ground and deserve to be safe? And how the heck do you protect those people? And then this allegation made from Israel that there are those that are posing as journalists and taking advantage of that, press badge.
Well, first of all, it needs to be noted that I am opposed to the killing of journalists. So let's make that clear. The second one, I think, is much muddier because it goes into what is a journalist and how can you be a journalist when you're living in an authoritarian terrorist state. It's sort of like saying, well, if this was Germany in 1940, they had journalists too, right? So when you get that, but can they be trusted? So it's for the news agencies hiring these stringers and journalists from the outside to determine the bona fides of the people they're hiring. I don't know how you could exist. I don't know enough about it, but it seems to me from the outside, I don't know how you could exist in Gazan society without being a friend of Hamas. It's
so in your mind,
like,
are there no journalists in Gaza right now? Like, how can you be a journalist?
I don't know. The fact is, I don't know, and so every time I read something, I don't know what to believe. I mean, that's my biggest problem with the whole Gaza conflict is I actually have no idea. I have no sense. I have no confidence that I have any idea of what's going on. I see pictures and allegations of people starving, but then I never really see, those pop up every few months and then they go away, right? And so I don't see pictures of people staggering around in the streets. I see some manipulated images or photo ops from time to time. I don't know. Sometimes Israel says, yes, he's a bad guy. We can prove it. I mean, in the instance you point out, that guy clearly had, according to BBC and CNN, and BBC works really, really hard on these verifications. The guy was a Hamas employee. Okay, well, that you could possibly excuse Israel killing him, I guess. It sort of gets into question. But what about the other four guys, right? Like, that's a whole different kettle of fish. So I think what all of us end up doing is suspending our disbelief of these stories because we don't really know. Like, yeah, I want to be able to say I'm opposed to the killing of journalists, but I'm really not certain whether that guy was a real journalist or not, or just a Hamas comms guy operating as a journalist.
Tara, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's just so difficult to know what's going on. And even with the social media videos and the footage and the facts coming out from citizens on the ground, I mean, how do you verify all of that in the midst of armed conflict? I just don't know how we can arrive at any shared set of facts right now. And so how do you arrive at a judgment? I just don't know.
Okay, let's leave it there. But we'll no doubt be coming back to this as the crisis and war over there continues. Let's say goodbye to our regular complimentary Hub listeners and viewers for this half of Full Press. For the full audio version, you can sign up to become a Hub hero or fellow. On the back half of Full Press, we'll be talking about the Nova Scotia fire bans, how the media has been covering or not covering that, and we'll get into the next chapter of Travis Dhanraj's grand exit from the CBC.